welcome everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the first webinar of this season. My name is Dave Ludgate. I'm the new chair of the Water and Environment Society, and I'm delighted to present our first topic, which is going to be on towards a circular economy of water in Ireland. So this webinar will feature members of the Circular team who will unveil insights from their cross-sectoral best practice guide towards a circular economy of water in Ireland, CEW. Circular is the first cross-sectoral industry-led innovation network dedicated to accelerating the net zero carbon circular economy in Ireland. It's a public-private partnership co-created by the Irish Manufacturing Research, IMR, and three strategic partners, the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication, the EPA, and the EIT Climate Kick, together with 25 founding members. I'm delighted to welcome Paul McCormack-Cooney and Eva McGuinness from Circular. Paul is the Circular Economy Best Practice and Toolkits Lead. In this position, he's responsible for Circular's thought leadership through design and development of Circular's case studies and best practice guides. Paul holds a BA in English Literature and Philosophy from UCD and an MA in Digital Media Technology from TUT. The decade-long career in B2B2C financial communications, Paul honed his skills in conveying complex concepts and inaccessible and engaging ways. His experience allows him to bridge the gap between research, business, and consumer, creating narratives that both inform and inspire action. Eva is water research engineer with Circular in IMR. Prior to this, she was a mechanical engineer in the Utilities and Energy Department, focusing on water and energy optimization and audit preparation on site. She has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from University of Galway. Her focus within IMR involves helping industry improve water processes through monitoring and metering, optimization projects such as CIP optimization and water treatment optimization, and preparation for certification audits. This is something that I'm quite passionate about myself in the whole water reuse and water stewardship side of things. So rather than listen to me, I'm going to hand over to Paul in a second. I will just ask everyone present if you have any questions, to put them in through the Q&A tab, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. But now I'll hand over to Paul and Eva to present. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Paul McCormack-Cooney. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present on our Circular Economy of Water Best Practice Guide, David and the rest of the team at Engineers Ireland. Dave's kind of given us a bit of an introduction to Irish Manufacturing Research and Circular, but I'll just kind of quickly cover some of it again. That's myself and Eva. My background is in communications. I'm not a water engineer, so if you have any water engineering questions towards the end, I'll be directing those towards Eva because she's much smarter than I am. So IMR are a mid to late stage TRL technology centre supported by Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland. And they were established in 2014 to position Ireland as a leader in advanced manufacturing. So our motto is to demystify, de-risk and deliver emerging technologies and concepts. And we have two offices, an innovation centre in Rathcoole of about 8,500 square feet and test beds and pilot lines in Mullingar of 35,000 square feet. We have four thematic pillars: digitisation, robotics and automation, design for manufacturing, and sustainable manufacturing. And Circular then falls within the sustainable manufacturing pillar. So Circular was set up in 2020. It's the national platform for circular manufacturing in Ireland. And it was launched to help companies to, again, demystify and de-risk the transition from a linear to a circular business model. The network started out with 25 founding members, and to date, we've doubled that with more than 50 members. It was launched, Irish Manufacturing Research is the Secretariat for Circulara, and it was launched in partnership with the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and the Environmental Protection Agency, and EIT Climate Kick. And our role is to support Irish industry to capture the circular advantage through awareness raising, knowledge sharing, and policy engagement, capacity building tools, innovation fund, and venture accelerator, and ecosystem collaboration. So these are some of what we offer. To date, we have produced 9 circular good practice sectoral guides, with the 9th one being the Towards a Circular Economy of Water in Ireland, which you see there at the end. And there's a QR code if you want to scan that for the actual full guide. But I'll show that again towards the end, so you don't have to, if you miss it now, you can catch it on the last slide. So kind of quickly, I don't know how familiar people are with the concept of a circular economy. So I'm just going to recap on what a circular economy is. And this kind of graphic here on the right-hand side is kind of a fairly good representation of it. So the linear economy is kind of what we currently operate within, and it follows a take, make, waste model where resources are extracted, used to make products, and then we throw them away into the bin. And a lot of people sometimes, when they think of circular economy, they think of recycling economy, where we're recycling some of the waste into new products, but we're primarily still following a one-way flow of resources. But really what a circular economy is where you take less and you throw away less, and kind of in its ideal format, you're actually creating no waste. You are just reusing the resources over and over again for one purpose or another. And how it does that, it does it through kind of the 10 R strategies. So when you take less, and then this is kind of moves from the left to the right, from a kind of a more sustainable to a less sustainable. So sometimes when we think of recycle, that's actually very low rung on the ladder in terms of sustainability. Ideally, kind of when you're over here on the left in the design phase, these are kind of the more sustainable options. So refuse is where you're avoiding unnecessary resource use altogether, and as such waste creation. Rethink is where you're innovating product use and business models to reduce consumption, minimize resource and energy use in production and consumption. And then in the consumption phase, you're looking at reusing the products and extending their life, repair, fix products to extend their life, refurbish, which is restore and update products to good condition, remanufacture, rebuild products to a like new condition, and repurpose is adapt products or components for new uses. And then at the end of life phase, that's where you're looking at recycling or recovering, where you're extracting energy or materials from non-recyclable waste. So why do we need a circular economy? So we are in the midst of a triple planetary crisis. So this is from the European Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, whose name I won't attempt to pronounce because I will butcher it. But he said that this planetary emergency grows more pressing with every passing day. Biodiversity loss is weakening our economies and undermining the well-being of billions of people. Pollution is now taking 9 million lives every year, and for entire nations, rising sea levels, droughts, and floods are becoming an existential risk. In its Global Risk Report 2024, the World Economic Forum singled out extreme weather as the topmost risk for the coming year, far ahead of armed conflict and economic downturns. This is from the UN's 2024 Global Resources Outlook Report. Resource extraction is the key driver of the triple planetary crisis. Extraction and processing of materials from Earth is driving 60% of climate change impacts, 90% of land-related biodiversity loss and water stress, 40% of health-related pollution impacts. So resource extraction has tripled in the last 50 years and is projected to grow another 60% by 2060. This will greatly exceed targets based on staying within 1.5 degrees of climate change and avoiding biodiversity loss. And often when we think of kind of diverting the path that we're on in terms of climate change, we tend to think of kind of energy and greenhouse gas specifically. Renewable energy and energy efficiency measures can only address 55% of the emissions. So meeting targets will also require to reduce the other 45% of emissions. We have to address the way we extract and process our raw materials. So circular economy offers a systemic and cost-effective approach to tackling this challenge. And there are many benefits to a circular economy. So macroeconomic circular economy is a new economic model which enables decoupling of GDP from resources. And key benefits include economic growth, resource cost savings, job creation, innovation opportunities. And the environmental column there, circularity is a key carbon mitigation tool and integral to the wider sustainability agenda. Benefits include decarbonization, carbon emissions reductions, reductions in consumption across resource nexus, and contributes to several UN Sustainable Development Goals. And social scaling circularity contribute to addressing labor market skills gap and regional unemployment, and significant job creation and job retention, providing quality work at all skill levels, financial savings, and consumer empowerment from repairing goods. And in the business column, circular economy represents a significant innovation and differentiation opportunity for enterprise. Benefits include resilience to resource price volatility and supply chain shocks, new revenue models and value creation opportunities, new customer relationships, and enhanced customer loyalty. Circular economy really is the direction of travel. We've kind of gone from it as a nice to have to a must have. So this is from the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. The EU's transition to a circular economy is a prerequisite to achieve the EU's 2050 climate neutrality target and to halt biodiversity loss. And it is at the heart of the EU Green Deal. So there's only one planet, Earth, yet by 2050 the world will be consuming as if there were three. The EU's transition to a circular economy will reduce pressure on natural resources, create sustainable growth and jobs, and is necessary to achieve the EU's 2050 climate neutrality target and to halt biodiversity loss. So it is something that is happening. We are in the kind of very early stages, I think, of transitioning to it. But it is very much kind of starting to pop up in terms of regulations and as a place where we have to go. And one of the key drivers now for it is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and CSRD. There's a lot of acronyms around this. So CSRD is the directive requiring companies to report. ESRS are the framework for the reporting, and ESG is what is being reported. And beginning with the 2024 financial year, companies will start reporting for CSRD from the 1st of January in 2025. This is a timeline for the reporting and who has to report. It's only really larger companies up to 2030 for the time being. But the CSRD was passed into law in Ireland on the 6th of July of this year. It's large listed companies, public interest company entities like banks and such that will start reporting from the 1st of January next year. And then into 2026, reporting on 2025 data. It's large EU companies, listed and non-listed, which meet two of the following criteria: either more than 250 employees, more than 50 million in turnover, and more than 25 million total assets. And then other listed entities meeting two of the three criteria: between 10 and 250 employees, between 900k and 50 million turnover, between 400k and 25 million in total assets. And then into 2029, it's non-EU companies or groups with more than 150 million in turnover. So it's not just EU listed companies. This is going to affect US companies or just any non-EU company that is trading or has a subsidiary in Europe. And the reporting begins with what is called a double materiality assessment. And this is where companies are required to report on how they will be financially impacted by sustainability matters in the short, medium, and long term. It's financial materiality and how the company impacts people and environment across their entire value chain. So it's how they are impacted and how they are impacting. And it's a huge amount of data that is actually required. There's, I think, approximately 1,400 data points that companies have to start gathering. And the double materiality assessment is when they will take kind of stock of what is material for them. And these the reports for CSRD are audited. So it's really putting ESG reporting on the same level as financial reporting for the first time. So if you decide that you are not going to report on your use of water, for example, you have to provide a legitimate reason for why you have chosen not to do that. So it's kind of a game changer in terms of ESG reporting. And while non-listed SMEs are not directly within the scope of the directive, they may need to provide information to larger companies in due course if they are part of the value chain. That's from the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. So we're seeing with a lot of our members who maybe aren't big enough to actually report for CSRD, if they are in the value chain of some of these larger companies, they are already been flagged to them that those companies are going to be starting to ask them for data. So there are 12 ESRS standards which companies need to report on. So the cross-cutting standards there on the left-hand side in pink, there's the general requirements and the general disclosures, and they are, everyone has to report on those, and that's where the requirement for the double materiality assessment sits. And then there are 5 environmental standards, 4 social standards, and 1 governance standard. And if you can see there, ESRS E3, that's water and marine resources, which is kind of pertinent for what we're talking about today. But there are disclosure requirements related to water in all 5 of the environmental standards. So this is kind of just a closer look at the water and marine resources E3 standard. So the top 3 there cover policies, actions, and targets. So you have to define your policies, actions, resources, and targets related to water and marine resources. Then on E4 there is water consumption. So you have to disclose your water consumption performance, including what you're recycling, reusing, and what you're storing, plus information on local basins quality and quantity. And then the financial aspect comes into in the E5. So assess the financial effects due to water risks and opportunities. So it's like what potential, this is kind of where the investors, this is the information investors want to know. It's like, how exposed are you via your use of water in this case? How exposed is your company financially? If they're looking to place money or invest in your company, it's like, how exposed are you to potential threat or potential shocks in the future? And also what opportunities maybe are there for you in all of these different aspects. So looking at then our sectoral guide towards a circular economy of water in Ireland. And there's a quote from National Geographic that all the water that will ever be is right now. So water is very much a non-renewable resource. Where is the Earth's water? 96.5% is salt water, and then 2.5% is fresh water. And then most of that fresh water is locked up in glaciers and ice caps. So then only 1.2% of that 2.5% is surface water, which is what humans have most access to. So we only have a fraction of the water on our planet is available for human consumption. And there's an increasing demand for those limited resources. So this graph on the right shows global water withdrawal throughout the previous century. So you can see the kind of increasing demand over that time period. And due to increasing population, economic development, shifting consumption patterns, global water use has increased by a factor of 6 over the past 100 years, and it keeps steadily growing. By 2030, estimations predict that global demand for fresh water will exceed viable resources by 40% if we continue as we are today. So very much kind of an immediate concern. In terms of water demand and use, worldwide, agriculture accounts for roughly 70% of freshwater withdrawals, followed by industry, which is just under 20, and domestic there at 12. But that kind of changes depending on a country's economic development. So you're looking at kind of in the higher income there, the agriculture accounts for about 44%. Industry 39, domestic 17, and then kind of in the lower income area, you're looking at 90% from agriculture, which is makes sense in terms of the development of those countries. So in manufacturing specifically, the demand for water is expected to increase by 400% by 2050. And then as the planet warms, water has become one of the main ways that we experience climate change. 90% of natural disasters and climate impacts are water related. So it's like hydrological events and such. And then a snapshot of SDG 6, Sustainable Development Goal 6 in Ireland, which is clean water and sanitation. We are doing kind of relatively well on a lot of them, but for example, their water quality deterioration in Ireland is mainly happening due to agriculture and wastewater pressures on surface and groundwater. Overall nutrient levels remain too high in many water bodies, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus. And that graph there in the top right-hand quarter is from the EPA. So where we looked at the 10R strategies at the beginning of the presentation, it's kind of different for the use of water. So that kind of typically refers to kind of more our typical materials in production. But water has kind of it exists in different stages. It can exist as a liquid, as a solid, as a gas, etc. So there's kind of a different framework that has been developed by Morcelletto from this research, Circular Economy of Water, Definition, Strategies, and Challenges. So it's kind of, it's coupled into three sort of categories, decreasing, optimizing, retaining. And then there's an umbrella, a kind of wider umbrella with the rethink strategy. So rethink is there where you're reconfiguring, reconceptualizing the way water is used to favor a more circular utilization. It's like that going back to the drawing board and kind of rethinking from scratch. Then again, moving from left to right with the versions on the left being more sustainable than the versions on the right. So in the decreasing, where it's you're avoiding the use of water altogether where possible. Reduce is using less water than in the business as usual scenario. And replace is substitution of water with another substance. And then in the optimizing circle there in the middle, there's reuse, recycle, cascading. Reuse is where you're using water without treatment again, and recycle is you're using it again, but after treatment. So it's kind of the treatment is the real distinction between those two. And then cascading is where you're using water in a sequence of consecutive uses. So you're using it for one purpose, and then once you're finished with that purpose, you're moving on to another purpose, and then et cetera, et cetera. And then retaining is where you're storing the water to a reservoir or tank, and recover is retrieval of valuable biomechanical compounds and retention or generation of energy. So for the sectoral guide, our methodology and scope, It was an international desk-based review. 38 cross-sectoral examples of good practice were identified through IMR project database and publicly available information online. There was the circular economy framework development. Our strategies clustered as either decreasing, optimizing, retaining. And that's a breakdown there on the right-hand side of the more than 80 strategies identified in the 38 good practice examples across the clusters. The majority were reduce, which usually requires little or no capital intervention, and recycle, which can be broadly customized to different processes. So that is the using it again with treatment. These are the featured case studies within the sectoral guide itself. So we looked at the food industry, pharmaceutical, chemical industry, automotive industry, cosmetics, and microelectronics. And more detail can be found in the actual guide on all of these case studies. This is AstraZeneca, which is highlighting a few of these for the presentation today. But this is AstraZeneca in Dublin. So they use vessel cleaning cycles modified to remove steps, adjusted cycles, reduced chemical cleaning agent by 83% and water by 45%, and saved at least 12,500 cubic meters annually. And then Wyeth, who Ava is embedded with. So if you have any questions about this particular case study, Ava can certainly answer those in detail. So Wyeth and Askeaton in Limerick. And there's the substitution of potable hot water for RO reject water, breaking down oil and grease before it reached the wastewater treatment plant's balance tank, and daily 55 meters cubed of potable water and 20 meters cubed less effluent. And then Intel used ultra-pure water filtration systems. 25% of its water loss is captured and through storage strategy and sent to new nanofiltration system used for scrubber systems, which remove particulates from industrial exhaust or gas streams, and saved at least 484,000 cubic meters of water per year. And then this is Nestle in Mexico, moving outside of Ireland now. The optimized processes, reverse osmosis, carbon filtration, UV and chlorination technologies. Water withdrawal was reduced to 0, and approximately 730 milliliters saved annually. And you may tell that my kind of knowledge of my detailed knowledge of the actual technologies, you can direct again the questions to Ava on these, but there is a breakdown. If you're not familiar with them yourselves, there's a breakdown within the sectoral guide of what all of the technologies that were used, and you can find more information on that there. So Nissan, they use dry booth technology in painting process, wastewater reuse, and rainwater harvesting. 11% reduction in the amount of water used per vehicle, targeting 21% by the end of 2022. And in India, they save 78,000 kiloliters per annum, and which is equivalent to about 320 households in terms of their use of water. And then P&G optimized their cleaning and sanitization steam, introduced as a new medium. Wash water is treated by dissolved air flotation, by filtration, and by reverse osmosis. The Shanghai plant saves 60 million liters annually. And globally, P&G reuse 3.3 billion liters of water annually, and have a target of 5 billion by 2030. So in terms of the kind of industrial processes, reuse is trickier to apply in these sectors. So the food and industry, pharmaceutical, cosmetics, and medical devices industry, due to the regulations and water quality requirements in those sectors. And recover is only really applicable to sectors where wastewater is rich in valuable biomechanical compounds, whether that they're found in the wastewater or for retention or generation of energy, such as sectors that it might be more applicable: electronics, cosmetics, plastics industry, medical devices industry, and the construction and built environment. So key barriers transitioning to a circular economy of water. The key barriers that were identified: that policies, lack of regulation over treated wastewater, and only drivers for circular economy of water strategies are typically the company's own sustainability goals. Then knowledge of water quality, so research and communication needed to prove safety and quality of alternatives to fresh water. There is that kind of communications aspect that you can take wastewater and get it back to an ultra pure state, but you have to overcome the kind of concept of people drinking water, for example, or using it in terms of human consumption. If they had known that it was initially wastewater. Costs of infrastructure, operational costs, maintenance and follow-up. Decreasing strategies can be costly. Recycling and cascading strategies require some investment, and store strategies require tank and pump infrastructure. And there's a lack of time and internal capacity to dedicate to water projects. So conflict with existing business priorities, time required for employees to rethink, plan, and implement circular economy of water strategies might not be considered a prudent allocation of labor. So this is in terms of key barriers transitioning to a circular economy of water. You can see costs and lack of time constraints across all the sectors. So all industry sectors need to recognize potential cost savings and revenue potential from implementing circular economy of water strategies. Policy and regulations are blockers, primarily for food and pharma. And then knowledge on water quality is a blocker in food, pharma, cosmetic industry, and medical devices, and the kind of more regulated sectors. So key recommendations in terms of advancing industry circular economy of water practices. So management commitment is required. There's urgency is needed to scale up circular economy of water implementation. Awareness and communication in terms of changing mindsets on the value of treated wastewater is important. Water profiles, maps, and return of investment analysis key to industry recognizing potential value savings and revenues from circular economy of water. Rainwater harvesting should be considered across all sectors, including hospitals, industrial parks, offices, hotels, housing apartments, etc. And strategies should be implemented to replace the use of potable water for any utilities where no human-related consumption is required. And here again is the QR code for downloading the sectoral guide. But so the transition, just to kind of recap, to transition to a circular economy of water is a prerequisite to achieving the EU's 2050 climate neutrality goals. It's no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. CSRD will make company inaction or inaction on reducing impacts clear and comparable for investors, consumers, potential employees, and other stakeholders. So like previously, when we published the sectoral guide, last year, the draft standards for CSRD were only be published at the same time. So the guide doesn't actually reference CSRD. So companies are really still just coming to terms with kind of what's required for it. But the fact that like in previous reporting, companies could kind of pick and choose or talk about the sort of specific good things that they were doing. Now, companies have to report across all those standards. If they're not reporting, they have to justify it, and it makes them very comparable from one to another for stakeholders. Capturing the data needed for CSRD is a huge task, and approximately 1,400 data points needed, as I mentioned before. And so if you haven't started capturing your data yet, you will need to do so soon. That's even if you are within the value chain. Maybe you're not one of the larger companies, but if you're within the value chain, that it is going to be a major driver for you into the future. So start by measuring, create a plan, set targets, tackle low-hanging fruit first. And it is a journey. This isn't something that's going to be done overnight, but it is the direction of travel, and every journey starts with a single step. So that is me. I think we can move to the Q&A section.